The laughter cut through the hall like glass. Grace froze mid-smile, her hand tightening around the edge of the dinner table. Chandeliers shimmered overhead, casting warm light over cold faces. Her daughter, Lena, stood at the microphone, wine glass in hand, voice dripping with mockery. "Oh, come on. You all know my mom, the woman who preaches perfection but can't even keep her own family together." The room erupted in uneasy laughter. Grace's pulse thundered in her ears. She tried to breathe, to steady her trembling hands. Her colleagues, her friends, all watching. The stage lights glinted against Lena's earrings as she continued, still smiling. "She's great at pretending, isn't she?" Grace didn't speak. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. She simply stared at her daughter. Her pride, her miracle, her undoing. The applause that followed felt like rain on an open wound. Grace stood slowly, napkin slipping from her hand to the floor. For a brief moment, their eyes met. A daughter drunk on attention, a mother drowning in silence. The morning after felt heavier than any hangover of the soul. The banquet flowers still sat on the counter, wilted, their scent sour and old. Grace stood in her kitchen, coffee cooling in her hands, eyes fixed on the empty chair across from her. The one Lena used to sit in, legs crossed, phone in hand, pretending to listen. The echo of last night still lived in her chest. Her daughter's laughter, the audience's uneasy chuckles, that final glance that cut deeper than words. She opened her laptop, pressed record, and stared into the small red light. "Hi, I'm Grace. I'm a mother, a teacher, and, apparently, a lesson I never wanted to be." She tried to smile, the kind that hides heartbreak behind grace. "Before I start, tell me something. Where are you watching from? Maybe Texas? Maybe London? I want to know how far this story travels, because pain has a strange way of finding company." Her fingers toyed with her mug. "I raised a daughter named Lena. Smart, beautiful, stubborn. The kind of girl who lights up a room until she decides to burn it down." A tear slipped before she could stop it. "I don't hate her," she said softly. "I just don't know where the girl who once held my hand went." The kettle began to whistle, shrill and lonely. Grace turned it off, whispering to herself, half prayer, half confession. Maybe one day she'll realize the difference between embarrassment and betrayal. She closed the laptop slowly, her reflection fading from the black screen. A mother swallowed by quiet, but still holding on to the faint hope that love might one day apologize. Grace didn't shout, didn't cry. She only whispered to herself, unheard beneath the laughter, "One day, life will answer for me." Days slipped by like forgotten pages. The house was too neat, too still, like grief disguised as cleanliness. Grace woke each morning to the same routine: coffee for 2, toast for 1. The other cup always sat untouched, steam fading into nothing. It's fading, like promises time forgot. Grace traced the edge of that picture every night, whispering, "Where did you go, baby?" Her heart answered, "She's still here, just lost somewhere you can't reach." At school, she smiled for her students. She laughed, corrected papers, gave advice to kids who still listened. But when the final bell rang, her car felt like a confession booth where she finally exhaled all the strength she'd borrowed to make it through another day. Sometimes she'd draft texts to Lena. "Dinner tonight? Miss you. Just talk to me." Then delete them, one by one, because love, when rejected, begins to learn silence. Outside, the street lights flickered on. Inside, Grace sat in the dim glow of the kitchen lamp writing lesson plans for children who weren't hers, teaching kindness she couldn't seem to keep in her own home. Her eyes drifted to the empty chair again. It wasn't just a chair anymore. It was a ghost, the shape of a daughter who once filled the room with laughter, now replaced by quiet that hurt more than anger ever could. And Grace knew, some heartbreaks don't explode, they echo. The storm came on a Saturday afternoon, gray clouds crowding the sky, wind pressing against the windows. Grace stood at the kitchen counter, washing dishes she hadn't used, listening to the hollow drip of the faucet. The silence between her and Lena had stretched into something living, breathing, almost cruel. The front door slammed. Lena's voice pierced the stillness. "Why are people tagging me, Mom? Why didn't you defend me?" Grace froze, her wet hands trembling. "Defend you," she said quietly, "from what you did." Lena threw her phone onto the table, her eyes glinting with hurt disguised as rage. "You love your image more than you love me." Grace turned slowly. Her voice was calm, but it shook at the edges. "My image doesn't stay awake at night praying you'll call. My image doesn't cry when I see your room empty. You think I care about reputation?" Her jaw tightened. "You made me look like a monster." Grace stepped closer, eyes wet but unyielding. "You didn't need my help with that, sweetheart." The words landed heavy, quiet, unplanned, but true. Lena's face crumbled. Her voice cracked. "You're unbelievable. You're not even trying." "I tried," she whispered, tears finally falling. "Every single day. You just stopped seeing it." Lena turned away, grabbed her keys, and stormed out. The door slammed again, louder, final. Grace stood there, chest rising and falling, heart echoing in her ears. The storm outside broke loose, rain streaking down the glass like all the words she'd never said. For a long time, she didn't move. Then she whispered to the empty room, half broken, half brave. "One day, life will show you what I couldn't say."
The house felt heavier after that night, not from sound, but from the lack of it. Even the walls seemed to breathe slower. Grace moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching picture frames, rearranging things that didn't need fixing. The rain had stopped outside, but inside her chest, the storm refused to end. She sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where laughter once lived. Lena's mug still sat by the sink, lipstick faintly smudged on the rim. Grace picked it up, tracing the edge with her thumb as if it could bring her daughter back. Her phone vibrated. A message from a friend. "Don't let it get to you, Grace. Kids say things." But it wasn't what Lena said, it was what she meant. The cruelty of truth wrapped in youth. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She walked barefoot through the dark house, her reflection following her in every window. Tired eyes, cracked smile, love that refused to die even after being shattered. In the living room, she stopped by the piano, the one she bought for Lena's lessons years ago. She pressed a single key. The note rang out, lonely, echoing through the house like a memory that still hurt to touch. Grace whispered to the dark, "You can't teach a child love if she's only learned pride." Outside, the moon hung low and pale. The air smelled of rain and regret. She returned to her room, pulled the blanket close, and let her tears come silently. Not the sobs of anger, but the quiet kind, the ones that belong to mothers who love too much to stop hoping. And somewhere in that silence, her heart broke again, softer this time, almost tender. The clock glowed 2:07 a.m. The house was quiet except for the whisper of rain brushing the windows. Grace couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand, reading old messages, tiny relics of warmth. "Love you, Mom." The last one was dated almost a year ago. Her throat tightened. She scrolled further, stopping at a photo. Lena at 15, flour on her cheeks, laughing as they baked cookies together. The sound of that laugh echoed in her mind until it hurt. Then a sudden buzz, a call, unknown number. "Is this Mrs. Matthews? Your daughter, Lena. She's here. She's been in an accident." Grace's body went cold. The world tilted. She didn't remember grabbing her keys, only the slam of the door, the hiss of tires over wet asphalt, and her heartbeat pounding like thunder in her ears. When she reached the small clinic outside town, fluorescent lights painted the hallway pale blue. Through the window of a curtained room, she saw Lena, motionless, ivy in her arm, her face bruised but alive. She pressed her trembling hand against the glass. Her breath fogged the window. She whispered, "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here." Inside the room, Lena stirred slightly, murmuring something, a single word that broke the silence like dawn breaking the night. "Mom." The camera would linger on Grace's face, fear, relief, forgiveness colliding in her eyes as the rain outside softened to a whisper. For the first time in months, life had spoken, and its voice was fragile but alive.
Morning crept into the hospital room like a hesitant apology, pale light touching everything softly, as if afraid to disturb the peace. Machines hummed in rhythm, a gentle metronome to the fragile heartbeat of a relationship once broken. Grace sat at the edge of Lena's bed, her fingers wrapped around her daughter's hand. For the first time in years, she wasn't trying to fix anything. She was just there, present, breathing. Lena blinked awake, her voice faint and trembling. "You stayed?" Grace smiled weakly, her thumb brushing across Lena's knuckles. "I never left, honey. Not really." Tears gathered in Lena's eyes, spilling quietly onto the white sheets. "I was awful to you, Mom. I said things I can't take back." Grace's eyes shimmered, the corners of her mouth quivering between forgiveness and heartbreak. "I know, and still I prayed every night that you'd find your way home." Lena turned away, shame washing over her face. "I thought you cared more about looking perfect than about me." Grace's voice broke, raw and real. "Perfect? I just wanted to be enough for you." A silence settled between them, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything they never said. Lena reached up, brushing away her mother's tears. "You were always enough," she whispered. "I just wasn't ready to see it." Grace let out a trembling laugh, part sob, part relief. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like a teacher or a mother trying too hard. She just felt human, broken, healing, loved again. Outside, sunlight spilled across the floor, warm and golden. The storm had finally passed, and in its quiet, love began to bloom again, softly, stubbornly, like forgiveness itself. The days that followed felt slower, softer, like the world had lowered its voice. The hospital smelled of coffee and antiseptic, but somehow for Grace, it smelled like second chances. She sat beside Lena every morning, brushing her hair gently, the way she used to when bedtime meant stories, not apologies. Lena would wince when she moved, her bandaged arm heavy, her eyes red from more than just pain. "Mom," she whispered one morning, "I don't know why you still care after everything I said." Grace paused, her hand trembling midair. "Because love doesn't expire when someone makes a mistake. It waits, sometimes quietly, sometimes with tears, but it waits." Lena's lips quivered. "I didn't realize how cruel I sounded that night. I just wanted you to see me." Grace smiled faintly, tears catching the morning light. "Sweetheart, I never stopped seeing you. You just stopped seeing yourself." The room went still. Outside, snow began to fall, tiny flakes gliding past the window, slow and graceful. Grace reached out and traced one against the glass, whispering, "You can't hold snow, but you can still feel its beauty. Love's the same." Lena reached for her mother's hand, fingers trembling. Their hands met, warm against the cold glass of the world outside. For the first time in a long time, neither spoke. They didn't need to. The silence wasn't punishment anymore. It was peace. The camera would linger there on two hands clasped in soft light, framed by falling snow. Because sometimes healing doesn't arrive with grand apologies. It comes quietly, through touch, forgiveness, and the simple grace of staying.
2 weeks later, the hospital released Lena. The morning air was sharp and bright, the kind that feels new, like it's been washed clean. Grace helped her into the car, careful with every movement, as if the world might break her all over again. The drive home was quiet, but it wasn't the old silence, not the kind built from walls and wounds. This silence felt gentle, alive, the kind where hearts finally start speaking without sound. When they pulled into the driveway, Lena stared at the familiar porch, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't deserve to come back here," she whispered. Grace's voice trembled. "Home isn't something you deserve, it's something that waits." Inside, the smell of cinnamon filled the air. Grace had baked, just like she used to when Lena was little. The house looked the same, yet everything felt changed, softer, lighter. Lena stopped by the fridge, seeing that old photo again, the one of her as a child, frosting on her nose. She smiled through tears. "You kept it." Grace nodded. "I never stopped keeping you." They sat together at the table. 2 plates, 2 cups, the rhythm of normal life quietly finding its way back. Lena reached across the table, her voice shaking. "Mom, I'm sorry for all of it." Grace squeezed her hand gently. "You don't have to be sorry anymore, sweetheart. Just be here." The afternoon light poured through the curtains, wrapping them both in gold. The piano in the corner sat untouched, but this time it didn't sound like a memory. It sounded like a promise. Because love, when returned, doesn't come crashing back. It tiptoes in, fragile, trembling, but real. Morning sunlight spilled across the kitchen table, painting everything gold. The same table where heartbreak once lived, now reborn with quiet laughter. Grace sat with her coffee, watching Lena stir sugar into her cup, the soft clink of the spoon more healing than any apology. "I can't believe you still make cinnamon coffee," Lena teased, her voice warm, fragile. Grace smiled. "Some things are worth keeping." For a while, neither spoke. The air carried peace, unspoken, but understood. Grace picked up her phone, opened her recording app, and pressed record. "Hi, it's Grace again. Last time you heard from me, I was the woman whose daughter betrayed her. But today, I'm the woman life spoke for." Her eyes shimmered, the sunlight catching every tear she refused to hide. "I learned something, that life has its own voice. It doesn't shout or punish, it whispers, in time, in forgiveness, in love that comes home after being lost." She glanced at Lena, who smiled back, eyes glistening. "If you're watching this and someone you love has broken you, don't rush to speak. Let life answer. It always does. And sometimes its answer is softer than you expect." She reached forward and pressed stop. The camera would linger, the two of them sitting together, morning light lapping around them like forgiveness itself.